How's it going, everyone? This is Kevin. Today I want to bring along with me to see if you really need 4K 120 versus 60 frames per second. So let's jump right into it. So with the current release of the Sony A7 IV, everybody's kind of been debating if it's worth it with the 4K 60 crop, and obviously to decide if you want to upgrade to the A7 IV or if you want to kind of suck it up a little bit and get the Sony A7S III to get the 4K 60 full frame and the 4K 120 10-bit 422 all the way throughout. So kind of that got me thinking that I wanted to put to the test the 4K 60 versus the 4K 120 using the A7S III that I'm currently filming with, to just see if it's really that much worth it, or do can you suck it up and just keep it at the 4K 60 even with the crop, because obviously this is not going to be cropped, but at least just to see the comparison of the slowed down footage to see if it makes sense to go with that route and go with the A7 IV or the A7S III. Now my goal is just to basically create two little sequences, one with 4K 60 and one with 4K 120, despite of obviously the slowed down version of them is going to be different, but just for the sake of comparison, just to see if it looks, I guess, better with the 4K 60 or the 4K 120. And I know it's all up to, I guess, your opinion, but it's just got kind of like a little comparison that I think would be kind of cool to do, because I know most people are kind of wondering about it, since I know I was about, do I want to go with the 4K 120 or the 4K 60 only before deciding to get the A7S III. But I also want to do this comparison for myself because I still want to get the A7 IV as a backup camera, but I'm just gonna go ahead and put this little test going and see what we can come up with. And also, obviously, I wouldn't just stick with, like, let's say 4K 60 and 4K 20 throughout a whole sequence, because depending on what I'm trying to film, it's just what I would use it for. But for the sake of the example, I'm just going to keep both of them separate with 4K 60 and 4K 120. That way you can just see a little bit of how smooth it can be, if it's really worth the money to invest into getting the Sony A7S III versus the A7 IV. So we're just going to go ahead and find something to kind of just make a little sequence of, and then that way you can see some comparisons. And those were the two examples that we were managed to take. Which one did you like better, the 4K 60 or the 4K 120? And which one would you use more when it comes down to using the slow motion for your videos? For me personally, I like to just kind of keep it a little bit of both. It just depends on what I'm trying to capture. If it's something more like kind of run and gun, I'll keep it at 120 because I know I can slow it down 40% or 20% and it'll still look fine, because it's just you're using more frames anyway. So that's a little bit of a hack, if you want to, that I use for my own self. So most of the time my kind of go-to is 4K 120, because that way I can just slow it down to whatever I feel like I need to do, and that's why I kind of like the 4K 120 better. So for me, I think the A7S III has been a good kind of investment to go with rather than the A7 IV. Not saying that it's a bad camera, because I also pre-ordered it and I think it'll be a phenomenal camera to have as a B camera when it comes on for video, but also very good for stills photography to replace my A7R III and my A7 III, because I'll be getting rid of the A7 III, have my wife use the A7R III just because she does photography too. So yeah, but with that said, I think either option is going to be a great upgrade from the A7 III or the A7R III when it comes down to your photography and videography. So I think just personally, if you go with the 4K 120 with the A7S III. You'll get a little bit more room for full frame, obviously, color depth with the 10-bit 422 across all the way to the 120 versus the 4K 60 cropped with the A7 IV, but you'll still get the 10-bit and the 422 to there. I don't know how it'll be for the 120 frames per second when it comes down to the A7 IV, but I'm sure it's going to be still pretty great when it comes down to the footage with it. And just, I think with the new sensor, I'm assuming it should be nicer, at least from the Matty Hapoya video that I saw. I think he did 120. He said it was 10-bit, but I think he just got a little bit confused, but I don't know. I couldn't find that information in the specs whenever I was looking at the camera. But if it's 10-bit at 1080, well, that's actually pretty cool, because it's a good B camera to have, or your main camera if you want to go with that. So my final question for you will be, does the 4K 120 matter so much that you're willing to basically, you know, kind of go with the, I guess, extra cash for it, or are you willing to sacrifice that to go with the A7 IV and save up the money to put it towards more glass or maybe a second body if you want to have two of them and kind of get basically like two A7 IVs almost for the price of the setup of an A7S III? But it's up to you. I'm curious to know. Leave me a comment down below. Would love to know your thoughts. But with all that said and done, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to like and subscribe. Share this video with a friend. I'll catch you guys in the next one. See ya.